Today we got Joaquim and Vaughn from Alpaca Network. It's been a while and I really wanted to connect with both of you. I know you've been in the crypto space for a while, and let's start with the stories. When and how did you got into crypto? Joe or Vaughn, if you want to start, the floor is yours.
I got into crypto back in 2012 on local Bitcoins. I was super interested in what this crazy thing called Bitcoin was all about. I wanted to get my hands on some, and I reached out to somebody. Local Bitcoins was really the only easy way to get Bitcoin. I sent somebody an e-transfer, and thankfully they actually sent me the, the Bitcoin.
Was this in the US, Toronto? Where were you based at the
This was
time?
in Toronto. Yeah, in the Toronto area.
Fascinated. So I imagine there's no exchanges and it was just so hard to do a peer-to-peer
Yeah.
transaction. Okay. And how was it, that first interaction? Was it awkward, weird, or it felt super easy?
It was a leap of faith, right? But this person had thousands of positive reviews. It inspired some confidence.
Cool. And what caught your attention at the time into Bitcoin? Yeah.
That's a good question. I just remember I was pouring through Bitcoin talk, trying to make sense of it. I knew a bunch of smart people who were interested in it. I also knew a lot of people who were like, this is crazy. Why are you getting into this? I can't remember exactly what it was. Probably Hacker News or something like that.
What about you, Joe?
Very different on my end. I was traveling the world. I had just started my first trip around the world. It was 2016, 2017, and my best friend had just came from an event and met the founder of Ledger Wallet. And that founder was like, buy Ethereum, like now. And I get a call from my best friend and we need to buy Ethereum. I don't know what it is, but we need to buy it now. We took the next 48 hours to figure out how to buy it. It was at $10, and the next day it was at $30. The next day it was at $50. It was right before the beginning of the first craze. That essentially got me involved in crypto. At the time, I was in Vietnam and was doing a little Southeast Asian trip. I was working on a travel blog and started writing like articles about best crypto to invest in and best ICO to invest in, which became number one on Google because my thing was all about how to get number one on Google, like being really good at search engine optimization. And so I went from a few thousand people a week on the website to tens of thousands of people at any moment. And I realized that no one had any idea how to do marketing of these cryptocurrencies. I was in 4chan and subreddits and all these, and yeah, Bitcoin talk and like all of these like random forums to find the next ICO. At the time, that's what they were called. Now more token generation events. And I started writing about them and bringing them to everyone else that was looking at them. Got into a lot of very early raises and early ICOs, but did so with very little money. It was really just to dabble and to learn with it. Because of those articles, I ended up being reached out to by my now business partner on the GA Capital side, Michael Gord. He reached out and was like, we have an opportunity to help a token, well, help a project launch their token. They have a few $1 million budget. You want to pitch this with me tomorrow? I was like, yep. Stayed up all night, built an entire marketing plan for them. We got the contract. And then lo and behold, the beginning of our first consulting company started, had to put together a team of 40 people in the next 3 weeks in order to deliver on what we promised. Ended up being a really successful launch. So it was like the beginning of it all, like the massive launch. So I really like dove both feet in and realized the power of one, compounding money, and two, the power of communities and utilizing those communities to do good. A lot of the projects that we worked with ended up doing quite well for their communities as well as for high social impact around the world. Fast forward 8 years, a lot of businesses have come to be within crypto and have been involved with helping on multiple fronts in multiple facets and mostly focusing on incubating, advising, and investing in crypto companies.
Amazing story. It does sound like you got sucked into the rabbit hole of crypto. And I wanted to go back to the time when you were backpacking in Asia and Vietnam. You did get that call, and this was probably like 2017, February, which the Ethereum price was around $10. Was it something that clicked right away in your mind because you knew there was so much friction in transferring money, trans borders, etc.? Or what did you felt so compelled to, or were so open-minded to this new form of money?
The fact that it never slept was a big one for me. I was like, wow, this thing, and Bitcoin too, but Bitcoin had already had its day. And I was really more focused on Ethereum because I was like, wow, finally a smart contract layer, essentially an internet where other things can build on it that has immediate ability for value to be transferred from one to the other. And it blew my mind. And I was like, this is the beginning of this is going to be very similar to what we saw with the stock market boom in the 20s when we started digitizing the markets. It was an enormous and very important period in the States and the world. Now I think we're seeing the same thing in this decade right now.
And at the time, were you a student or you just graduated?
I
You're
had
off?
just graduated and then I worked for a year. I was managing a $30 million budget at L'Oreal Canada, managing the Garnier shampoo brand. The idea was after university, I was planning on staying there a few years to learn everything about how to manage those large scale budgets and super like national level marketing campaigns. But after about a year and a half, I had been planning my escape for a while because I just knew I couldn't live in the corporate world or focus on that. I'm still very grateful. I learned a lot from it and it allowed me to put proper processes in a lot of the other businesses that I've scaled since then.
I had the same corporate experience. It's two different worlds. And I think could be quite interesting for our audience as there's so many students out there that don't know the path and they have a lot of questions in where to go or what to do after graduate. And I think your story can be quite inspiring for them as they listen to this podcast. And but I'm interested about your story. Was when you got into local Bitcoins, were you still in college in Toronto or you already graduated and were working your first job?
Yeah, I was still in university. I was just finishing up my degree in engineering. So back in 2012, I would have been in my last year. I didn't have a lot of money. I wish I had more to spare at that time. I think BTC was around something like three or $400.
Well, and what was your plan after graduating? You'd go and work in an engineering firm, or you immediately was like, I want to go into this new industry?
So I was always, I knew I didn't want to do engineering. I did an internship and that convinced me that I wasn't really that interested in engineering, but I was super interested in data and at the time, machine learning. And so that was the direction that I took my career. I spent the next like 12 or 13 years working in that space.
Amazing. And back in the day, did you already had a vision and thoughts of where AI would be today? Were you already experimenting with OpenAI's API?
There was no OpenAI back then. Back in 2012, there was a breakthrough with deep learning in ImageNet. And it was actually at the University of Toronto, a group of students and Jeffrey Hinton figured out how to build a neural network that was competitive with the older established computer vision methods. And actually, it was Ilya Sutskever who went on to start OpenAI, who was one of those students. So that was the origins of the deep learning boom back in 2012, when everybody realized like, whoa, this has a lot of potential if we were to scale it up with compute.
Awesome. If a time traveler would go back into that day and told everyone in the class, in 5 years from now, we'll have this AI that we can all interact with, would be something you would believe in? That'll be possible?
I think I would have probably been a bit skeptical, but at the time, the fact that you were able to recognize what was in a picture better than a human and that you could do it at scale with incredible accuracy was pretty amazing. So I guess the big surprise was the next breakthrough, which was transformer models, which were able to do that at scale for language. And that was an incredible advancement. But I guess to me, intuitively, I would have thought that computer vision would have been more complicated, but turns out that language is pretty complicated as well.
Well, quite fascinating. And going back to Joe, I know in this period of time until today, you have been involved and had an idea for some of the most disruptive projects in the space. If that's something you want to touch upon and share, I think could be interesting.
Yeah, 100%. We have the opportunity I've had the opportunity and everyone else within our firm has the opportunity to have an enormous amount of deal flow. Like I'm in 80 plus different deal flow groups. We get access to hundreds of projects a week. I'm continuously seeing what's happening and the different trends coming within the market. Those allowed for really interesting things to come about. In the last 2020 run, there was many different companies that were interesting. One of which was to create essentially a permissionless escrow system that ended up becoming TrustSwap, the top launchpad. And so that was one of the ideas that I brought to market alongside a few really connected and influential guys. And yeah, ended up becoming a super successful project. I'm not involved with it anymore. I was friendly with the current managing team. Since then, we've been continuing to scale a lot of the project, bringing incubation. Recently, through one of the VIP crypto communities that I run on Telegram, I came across something that Vaughn had shared related to a really interesting and novel idea called IMOs. And I had never heard that word before. I'm thinking a lot of you who are on this call or listening to this podcast also have never heard of IMOs. IMOs are essentially initial model offerings. And what it is a new crowdfunding model that allows for anyone to raise around an AI model. So whether it's researchers or developers or founders that have a really good AI model, they can raise around that model and immediately bake in a revenue share for a percentage of the top line revenue to be shared across anyone who holds a token, which I think is a complete game changer. Models now have another route to market that is not just a centralized method of raising, which right now what we're seeing with these top LLMs and top AI models is just a few companies or the top 10, 20 VCs pouring hundreds of millions or billions of dollars into this. I think that's a super novel concept that I'd love to go deeper into.
It seems that you're a visionary and you're really early on into trends and you see them from early stages, especially with the experience you bring to the table. What I wanted to ask is, do you see IMOs being the same as what happened with ICOs or with the potential to develop that in a way?
Yeah. So just to be transparent, the concept of IMOs is something that the Aura protocol came up with and are focusing on building out with, and they've built out other ERC standards such as the ERC 7641 standard and the ERC 7007 standard in order to make that possible. We can extrapolate that towards something that can be cross-chain and integrated into a lot of other launchpads and to co-launch with it. That's how I ended up in the rabbit hole of the intersection of AI and Web3. We're focused on something with Alpaca Network that's even bigger. One of the components that will come from it, what we're really focused on is if there are so many AI models and AI agents that come to the world, as we're seeing, there's hundreds of models a week coming out right now for the public. How do we ensure that those can actually work together? And how do we coordinate? Is there a way for these AIs to coordinate with each other and communicate properly so that they can stack and do much more complex tasks? But that's really where we started working together, Vaughn and I, to try and create a solution for that.
And tapping into that, Vi, if you want to answer, how was the story? Why decentralized AI? Why Alpaca? And you have access to a lot of deal flow and opportunities. Why doing these together?
Yeah, sure. I think that ever since I came across Bitcoin and crypto, I worked in AI, but I was paying a close eye on how the crypto industry was evolving and changing. And it seemed like with every wave or bull run, there was more progress being made. There was more capabilities and functionality. Like I love this idea I think it was around Ethereum, like building out the skill tree. And each wave of progress, there's more and more skills built out, like in Civilization or one of these old video games. So that's the way I was looking at Bitcoin and crypto. And so I was just paying attention to see when would it make sense for crypto and AI to converge. That's when the IMO model came across. And I thought, okay, this is great. This solves a whole bunch of problems that the AI ecosystem is facing. Number one, there's the centralization happening right now, this gravity well of talent being sucked into the open AIs, the Anthropics, and these like AI labs, and that they're super centralized and high risk of point of failure in the future or corruption. All of the friends that I had who were studying at institutions like the Montreal Institute for Learning Algorithms, which is the largest hub of AI researchers in the world, didn't really have a lot of options. They would either work for major tech companies or AI labs. There wasn't much other choice for them. I thought this was a great way to help them fund their projects because they're the ones doing cutting edge research breakthroughs. And so if they can get access to resources that they need in order to build these models, that's going to be a good thing. So what do they need? They need access to compute. Crypto is fantastic for accessing decentralized compute. There's tons of compute available, whether it's with protocols like Cash or Aether or this long list of other decentralized compute providers. Even in BitTensor, there's a pretty large ecosystem of compute being offered, where anybody can basically make their GPUs available or cluster GPUs at a really competitive price. It's basically half the price or less as to what you would have to pay if you're going with Google Cloud or other hyperscalers. You can get access to very affordable or free compute, and also access to resources, funding to pay for costs to build the model and bring it to market. So that made a lot of sense to me. And then why Alpaca? Alpaca, the idea of llama is very popular in the AI world. Meta has a model called the llama model. And so we thought that maybe Alpaca could be the decentralized version of that, or the decentralized brother to the llama.
Very interesting. Touching upon decentralization, I tend to see OpenAI and Facebook as a black hole just sucking in all the information in the world. And right now, I was just checking, Microsoft is at an all-time high in terms of stock. It's worth over $3 trillion. Do you see the people having a way to compete with the decentralized form of AI that doesn't own our data in the future, or that doesn't know everything about us? Where do you guys see this going?
You mean in terms of, can a decentralized AI movement compete with the decentralized one?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's very possible and likely. I definitely wouldn't bet against thousands of smart people working around the world who may or may not have the ability to work for OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, or Microsoft. There's just a lot of talent and people in the world that don't have access to these networks. And so when you create another option for them to participate, and you build this intelligence market that anybody contribute to, it's, meritocratic, that's tough over the long term to compete against. And yes, there's benefits and strengths that the centralized AI labs have. It's easier to raise billions of dollars in funding. Maybe you don't need billions of dollars to build a movement and to get started, and to then build an actual project that had billions of dollars of resources, right? That is as capable as these centralized research labs.
Makes sense. I wanted to ask Joe in particular, and what I'm seeing here, it's a vision coming into fruition of why crypto is coming into the equation. Will there be a token? Because we could bring on people on the rails of this system.
Yes, there will be the PACA token that will power the entire ecosystem. There's already a lot of token utility that we built into some of the MVPs that we are in the process of sketching out and drafting. For this network to work and to create the ultimate goal, there definitely needs to be a token that's powering that entire ecosystem. Just to go back to your other question, I did want to add one more thing there. Your question was, is there a way for a decentralized network to compete against these multi-trillion-dollar companies? The exact same question was being asked in terms of if Bitcoin would be able to compete against a $10 trillion gold industry, or if Ethereum would ever be able to compete against all of these major app stores. And then if you look at the current decentralized AI space, we have the Fed token at a $3.5 billion valuation. I think that's very far from its final form. A lot of top networks are coming together, such as the Morpheus network. Very interesting things that Vaughn had mentioned, BitTensor. And I know that a lot of certain L1s are focusing as well, like pretty heavily on going into crypto, such as Near. There's an enormous amount of interest. I think there's a lot of incentive as well, since there's so much talent. We have to imagine a world in the next 10 years that is completely different. Like, we're going into a world where everyone will be AI augmented, and someone that's AI augmented is going to, at the very least, have 10x the current capabilities that they have. And we're just getting used now, like relearning our habits using AI. How many times do you catch yourself in the middle of doing something? You're like, maybe there's a faster way to do this, or let me double check it with this or that AI. So I find myself every day becoming more and more productive with these. And I think this is just the beginning. And then when you start stacking AIs together, that's when it becomes interesting. And so going back to your question of if there is a token coming out, the Pocket token itself is going to be the main driver of the entire AI coordination layer that we're in the process of creating. So what that means is essentially we're in the process of looking at how we can build an AI agent that acts as a project manager or a coordinator of other AI agents within the Web3 space. And the way that you do that is by ensuring that they can communicate properly together, and they'll need some form of trusted verification, of trusted communication, which is where it drives a lot of value to have a token in the back.
So you just say that having a token and bringing Web3 with AI allows it to democratize that this industry that's so centralized in one party that you need to pay to enter. And a lot of people don't even have access to Visa or MasterCard to use ChatGPT or OpenAI. So would you see that as AI democratization?
You want to take this one?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's important these AI projects, models, and agents can be user owned and that anybody can participate in funding them, but also benefiting from that ownership in various ways. I think it's democratizing the access and the participation for anybody in the world who can get access to crypto, which I think was pretty much anyone at this point, or at least almost anyone. It's a great way to open it up and to ensure that there's this level playing field and that anybody can get access who has the means or the motivation, maybe not necessarily the financial resources, they can contribute or work in other ways with their knowledge, their time. So I think it's a great way to level the playing field.
Yeah, fascinating. And something I must ask, it was quite interesting as yesterday, I'm based here in Lisbon, and not sure if you're familiar, but WorldCoin, a project backed by Sam Altman and OpenAI, scans people's iris as they exit the subway. And I'll speak with a regulator from Luxembourg as she works in the European Commission, and she immediately wanted to shut this down. But upon doing a deep dive, WorldCoin has certain premises that allows you to keep the data only on the orb. And my question here for Alpaca Network, how does he handle the privacy aspect, data security, and the decentralized AI?
That depends on the builder or whoever is putting the project forward. The idea is that through PACA launch, we're able to support different builders, developers, or researchers who are building their models. The responsibility or the way they deal with data management and privacy is going to be governed by them. That's not something that we ourselves will control. However, we will have the ability to do vetting and due diligence on the projects that come through. And obviously, we want to make sure that there's a certain amount of ethics involved with where the data is coming from, how it's going to be managed, and all of that. And maybe eventually we'll even be able to put partnerships in place with some of the existing data providers. Like there's more and more of these projects popping up within the decentralized AI ecosystem right now. Those kinds of partnerships and integrations are things that we're looking at right now.
Very interesting. Will there be rewards or benefits or even a governance tool to incentivize developers to contribute? How can they even get involved with this?
Joe, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, for sure going to be a governance mechanism, and also in terms of actual rewards for people working within the token ecosystem and within the entire Alpaca network. It will depend on if that's being done internally or through the grant program. So I'm happy to delve into that on another podcast in a much deeper fashion. A lot of that's going to be outlined much more clearly within our white paper. Something that I found interesting that you mentioned in response to using WorldCoin as an example, there are other decentralized networks and, for example, deepen networks that are really showing that, yes, on one side, you want to have that privacy. And on the other, there's a huge value to getting such a large sample pool of distributed continuous data. So, for example, with Grass, the whole network, anyone can go and see what you're doing on your screen. If you download the Grass agent, they utilize that data to understand exactly what each person's perspective of the internet looks like. They're utilizing that data to enhance multiple different things from a UI and UX perspective to a lot deeper dives on everything else. Same thing's happening, for example, with one startup that's working on a decentralized AI application that allows you to, similar to macros on Excel, show the AI exactly what you're doing to complete a certain task. And it learns that and then is able to use that data, and then you get paid for that data because that's how they're training their models, by having a bunch of people do those complex tasks and then having those be modeled out. So there's so much positive momentum happening within the space. We want to be a hub for that positive momentum for these top researchers. It's in Montreal. Vaughn is currently based in Montreal, next to the largest AI hub in the world, or at least one of the top five. There's also an enormous amount of talent out there looking for opportunities like this. So we're really looking to build this up from ground up with the entire community, for the community, to become the main location for decentralized AI to thrive.
Training our data and selling it as users, not us being the product, has been what's happening since 2005 when Google launched the first non-subscription plan. We have free Gmail, free YouTube, but we end up being the product. It does sound like a new renaissance. It seems very interesting what Grassy is doing and other projects.
If you look at large enough pools of people, how did Google end up digitizing most of the books of the world, which then a lot of that data was probably used to train the current LLMs? Like, it all built on each other, right? But how did they do that with CAPTCHA? You would put CAPTCHA and set that up, but then it would allow you to see and read very difficult text in the beginning. And every time I go onto a CAPTCHA now, it's getting more and more complicated, the things that they're making us do. Every single one of us are in the process of training those models through doing those things. That's just one example, but that's being done in a very centralized fashion, and data is worth gold. These are opportunities for us to bring this back to the common person and for them to get a small portion of the value that they're bringing towards the entire network.
You just said that every time we solve a captcha, we're training an AI for Google or a major corporation.
I don't know if it's an AI, but you're definitely training a very strong data set. Yes,
I wonder if the majority of the population even knows about this.
definitely not. A great TED talk about it.
Fascinating.
Mhm.
Since Joe mentioned you're working next to one of the top 5 AI research hubs in the world, can you dive into your work there, or what have you seen that might also relate to Alpaca, and where we'll be in 5 years or 10? What is going to be the impact in the centralized AI landscape?
Sure. I've been really involved in the Canadian and Montreal AI ecosystem for a long time now. I started a group called Montreal Data, focused on data science and machine learning. We started that in 2014, and it grew into the largest ecosystem and community of machine learning and data practitioners in Canada. That was the way I got connected with the Mila ecosystem. A lot of the people in that network were also either studying at Mila or graduated from there. I know a lot of people who are there currently. That's the backstory behind my connection to Mila.
And for people that are non-technical and are listening in and want to get involved, what are some of the options on the table?
Ah,
Great question.
not
Yeah.
non-technical and interested in getting involved. I think that it's getting easier every single day to use AI to do different things. And that's what inspired us to start with Task PACA, right? We saw this growing gap between the capability of AI that you were able to achieve if you had a certain level of expertise, um, versus what people were using it for. If you're a non-technical user, the barriers to entry are still low, but it requires practice, testing, iteration. Recently, Anthropic released a really interesting feature called desktop use. I think that's cool because now we're starting to see these AI models interacting in more uncontrolled environments, which is really interesting. But you're able to interact with your desktop environment. It can point, it can click, it can type, and it can do all kinds of different things based off of vision and screenshots that it's taking throughout the process. So w- where we're where we're going with that right now is that these tools are getting easier and easier to use. It just requires familiarization and awareness as to where the capabilities are and what they're able to achieve. If I was a non-technical user, then just start playing with it and seeing what you could do.
So let me see if I got this right. Task PACA allows us to create an AI agent that does a task, and we can even put it in marketplace to earn crypto or to do XYZ, like the meme coin AI agent that traded up to $3 million.
Yeah, think of it like your AI assistant or AI project manager that can organize and manage a team of AIs and humans. So you tell it what you'd like to do, and then it takes the lead and manages the team. If it's a easy task, it can leverage other AIs who are specialized in certain things. If it's more complex, it can delegate that work to humans who are experts, who can either write up some software or who can work towards building a model that's going to be able to automate the task that's boring, tedious, or repetitive that you just don't want to do yourself.
Very interesting. Joe, I feel you have some thoughts, and I'm very curious your vision on Alpaca, especially on the tasks marketplace, if we can call it, or task pack as you call it.
There's a lot coming. That's all I'm going to say about that for now, because we're coming up on the hour and I need to drop to another call, unfortunately. But I'm happy to do a whole other deep dive just on each of the components of the larger Alpaca network and the whole PACA ecosystem that we have planned.
Okay.
And there is one thing that you had asked, which was how can non-technical and even technical people get involved with the project? And there's a few immediate things that you can do. Number one, evidently joining the community to stay up to date on what's going on and understand what's going on within the entire decentralized AI space. And then that's the easiest immediate call to action that I would offer you. Secondly, write up tasks. If you have specific things that you think that you don't want to do anymore and that you think an AI could do, even if you think it's way too complicated, send it to us on Telegram, send it to us on the Discord, contact at Alpaca Network. We want to see those tasks. That's the most important thing right now. Third, if you are interested in doing a deep dive within the whole crypto and AI space, whether you're an AI enthusiast or interested in becoming more knowledgeable about AI, you can sign up as a lab mentor or a lab mentee to start learning more about it. We're going to have proper onboarding ramps for mentors to meet mentees. And that can be because you want to have a project within the space, or that can be because you want to get more and more involved within the decentralized AI space. So lots of really exciting things coming, and excited
Cool.
to come back and go deeper with you again here, Antonio.
Sounds like there's a lot we can do. I can't wait to create my AI trading agent to do meme coins and to trade for me.
That's not the whole objective here, but sure.